What is up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of For Your Viewing Pleasure. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Wesley Coleman. As we break down the upcoming slate of games, we are looking at Week 16 in the National Football League. We are nearing its end. We wait with bated breath for all these months and all these weeks, and it's just like it comes like that, and it goes. So, Wesley, welcome to the show. How's it going?
I'm good, man. This is we have some Saturday games this week,
Yep.
which is pretty cool. And then I think we've got quite a few playoff previews, or at least both teams in games are in the playoffs or should be in the playoffs. So some interesting stuff going on.
So what we decided to do is we decided to take a look at the playoff picture prior to talking about the upcoming slate of games, because really there's a lot of teams that have been eliminated now. I'll read that list off to you. In the AFC, the eliminated teams are the Jets, Browns, Jaguars, Titans, Patriots, and Raiders. Okay. In the NFC, that list is growing. Bears, Panthers, and Giants are now officially mathematically eliminated from postseason play. In the NFC, there's a lot of teams still clinging to life, whether it's for division hopes or whether it's for a wild card. In the AFC, it seems pretty cut and dry. This top 7 teams are probably not going to change, barring the Chargers completely falling flat on their face down the stretch. And so when you think about the top 7 in the AFC, Wesley, the Chiefs, Bills, Steelers, and Texans have all locked up a playoff spot, have not clinched a specific spot in the postseason in terms of ranking. What do you think about the AFC side in terms of the playoff picture?
Well, so the 3 teams that are quote unquote in the hunt in the AFC that haven't clinched have a 99%, 91%, and 87% chance
Right.
of making the playoffs. I mean, the Chargers, I know they could completely bomb, but they have right now an 87% chance of making the playoffs. There's probably not a lot of drama in the AFC. I like it holding on. I mean, just this scenario of all these 7 things that have to happen for the Bengals to win out and sneak in is funny and is interesting, but I hope the drama stays going for a couple more weeks.
It's definitely interesting, and you look at the probabilities, the percentages that you just mentioned.
5% chance of the Bengals making the playoffs.
Right. Even the Colts, they're the 8th team in these 10 teams
10%.
total. 10. The Dolphins 7. So that's not a good look. Now, when you go to the NFC side of things, it's starting to get a little bit clearer, but there's still some muddy waters. Only 3 teams have clinched playoff spots right now. The Lions cling to the number 1 seed. The Eagles, due to tiebreakers, are the 2nd seed. The Vikings, actually, right now, the 5th seed. They've clinched a playoff spot. And so then you have the Buccaneers, Rams, Packers, and Commanders who round out the top 7. But the Seahawks hang around at 8-6. The Falcons hang around at 7-7. The Cardinals at 7-7. Even the 49ers, Cowboys, and Saints are alive in some way. And you're going to say, Jeff, the Saints aren't alive, but that's fine. They are still technically not mathematically eliminated. So what do you think about the NFC side?
Well, I think it's fun. Vikings do control their own destiny as far as being the number 1 seed. If they win out, they will take over and be the number 1 seed instead of the 5th seed. The Packers, they've got a 99% chance. They're 10-4, but they're going to wrap that up in Lambeau on Monday night by beating the Saints, and also ending the Saints talk of playoff push. So Buccaneers an 83% chance, Commanders at 78, and then the Rams are the 54% chance. So that's the one that kind of leaves a few things interesting. So the Seahawks and Falcons both have 36% chances, which the Falcons, if you just watch them play, it's 0% because they're terrible. But there's a battle between the Seahawks and the Rams of who's going to come out of the division and make the playoffs.
It's definitely interesting how this is going to look down the stretch in the NFC side of things, because you bring up the NFC South and the NFC West. Likely, I would say almost a guarantee they're only going to have one team making it from that division. That's the division winner. So when you look at who do they have left, so the Rams play at the Jets versus the Cardinals and finish against the Seahawks. The Seahawks, they are at the Vikings, or they host the Vikings, at the Bears, at the Rams. How do you see the NFC West playing out?
I mean, it seems like the Seahawks can kind of get back into it. The Rams, though, the Seahawks seem like the better overall team. The Rams seem like the scary team that you don't want to play.
I agree with that.
Now if the Rams can stay hot and just not turn the ball over and not be dumb, I mean, they can win the division. And again, I think they're a team you don't want to see in the playoffs. But the Seahawks overall are the better quote unquote team.
Have you read anything online or seen anything on Twitter about Geno Smith's injury? I know he got hurt in the last game, but I don't know what the severity is.
No, I wasn't, and I don't think they would have any injury report updates until
Not yet.
Wednesday anyway, so
Yeah.
we wouldn't know. But I believe the only thing that I heard at the start of this week is the Seahawks are optimistic that he will play next week.
All right. So then what about the NFC South? You have Tampa Bay, who's leading right now at 8-6. Their remaining schedule at the Cowboys versus the Panthers and then versus the Saints. Meanwhile, Atlanta, they're at home versus the Giants. They go to the Commanders and finish up against Carolina. How do you see that shaking out?
Yeah, I mean the Buccaneers are the team that deserves to make the playoffs out of that division. They're going to end with the three straight wins here to end the season. They'll end 11-6, and they are a team you don't want to play in the playoffs. With Baker Mayfield doesn't throw interceptions, that's a team that can run the ball. Mike Evans is healthy and looks ridiculous, and their defense is way better than nobody's talking about it.
Yeah. All right, so let's take what we've learned about the playoff picture because, again, in the AFC, it's pretty much set. It's just a matter of where are they going to fall? Who gets in is pretty much set, but the Steelers could be the 3 seed. They could even be the 2 seed if things happen crazy down the stretch in terms of Christmas Day game against the Chiefs. They could win the AFC North this weekend by beating the Ravens on Saturday. Or if they lose it and they lose to the Chiefs, they could find themselves as a wild card and all being on the road for all of their playoff games. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, look at must-watch games and let's keep in mind, all the stuff that we just talked about in the playoff picture. What are some of your must-watch games and why?
Well, I mean, I really like the Philadelphia Washington game.
Yep.
That's kind of probably the highlight game from Sunday. Sunday's a big day. It's a ton of games, but that Philadelphia Washington one sticks out to me. I think that both teams have some questions. There's been times this year where both of them been considered a pretender or a front runner. So I think there's something to be found. The Washington could have, should have, almost did lose to the Saints in a terrible fashion.
Crazy finish that game.
that game shouldn't have been that close. Jaden Daniels had 3 different touchdowns of over 60 yards that he missed all 3 of them within, he was in a foot of hitting the receiver, but still missed them. So they've got to make some corrections there. And then Jalen Hurts hasn't been great this year. He was better this past week, but the month before that, he has not looked like a great quarterback. They've been riding Saquon Barkley. It'll be interesting to see between these two teams what's going on. And then there's still, they are in the same division, 3 games separating. I'm not gonna think that the Commanders are coming back to take this division, but I think Washington needs to at least show some competition in this game because this is the kind of team they're going to face in the playoffs. Maybe even this team.
Yeah, because you look at Philadelphia's final stretch, they have at the Commanders that we just talked about. They host the Cowboys, host the Giants. Outside of this game, it's a pretty easy stretch for Philadelphia. And I think they're eyeing up the number 1 seed in the NFC and seeing if they can keep that alive. I agree with that game. I think the Saturday slate is great. I think if you're looking at Saturday's games, you've got Steelers, Ravens at 4:30. This is a game where you're like, it's the AFC North on the line. If the Steelers win this game, they have a 2-game lead. They have swept the Ravens. They would clinch the AFC North. That's what's on the line for the Steelers. Now, if the Ravens win the game, it's a race to the finish in the final games of the regular season. I think this is going to be a great game. It's in Baltimore, M&T Bank Stadium. The Steelers are getting 6.5 points in this game already. That's the early line. I think that's crazy, but I think Texans-Chiefs is a good game too, depending on if Patrick Mahomes plays due to his high ankle sprain. What do you think about the Saturday slate?
Yeah, I think that there's something for this Baltimore-Pittsburgh game. It's always a big one. I think that over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I guess since they faced each other before, this game's lost a little bit of the luster that it had a month ago. As there's more and more hype about Lions and Bills. Obviously, the Chiefs have kept a good record, and then the Eagles. The way that's kind of been going, these two teams have been a little less thought of.
Yeah.
If Baltimore loses this game, I think it's a really bad look for them. And there's been a whole lot of MVP talk for Lamar Jackson. And listen, Lamar Jackson's great, but you can't be the MVP on a 500 team that loses all of its big games, or a lot of them. So it's I think this is a huge game for them at home. I'm not going to hate on it all. It's just it again has just lost some of the luster, as there's kind of been two AFC teams and two NFC teams that have been getting a lot of the talk and hype over the last month.
Absolutely. And the Steelers have definitely been trending in the wrong direction, especially offensively the last few weeks. And so you're looking at this game like, is this going to be a typical Ravens Steelers slugfest? I would say yes. The over under is 44.5. I would lean towards the under. Just saying, as a Steeler fan, I would lean towards the under in this game.
It is by far the most expensive ticket of the weekend, almost $100 more than any other low end ticket. The cheapest ticket's $227.
What? That is crazy. That's a low end ticket?
That is where tickets start at $227.
Oh my god.
The next lowest is 149 and then 130, like, or 147 and 149. So like it's a lot more, $75 more a ticket than.
Oh my gosh, that game's on Fox. I'm just seeing this for the first time. If they have Tom Brady again, I'm gonna puke. Anyways,
you don't like the Raiders?
I've never been fond of the Raiders, to put it that way.
So before that game on NBC and Peacock, you do have Houston and Kansas City. Now, again, I look at this. I'm looking at the playoff. I'm like, cool, 4 playoff teams, and they're meeting up. And then, like, this kind of same thing we just said about Pittsburgh and Baltimore, kind of lost some of the luster from earlier in the year. I mean, Kansas City's not getting the respect they deserve this year. And I say deserve because they have won a lot of games. May not have been in pretty fashion. And then CJ Stroud has definitely taken a step back. Is this just another meh game of 2 playoff teams? Or is this going to be are we going to learn something in this game too about one of these teams?
I think a lot of it hinges on Patrick Mahomes' health. I mean, if I had to bet right now, does he play in this game? I'd probably say no. I saw a report today on Twitter where someone said that Patrick Mahomes, said his ankles responded very well. It's not as bad as the injury he had when they played against the Jaguars a couple years ago in the playoffs. But if he's hampered, the Texans are they're not a bad defense, and they do sack the quarterback a lot. And Patrick Mahomes has gotten hit a lot this year. And so I'm wondering if the Chiefs aren't wondering in this game, should we put Patrick Mahomes out there? If he can't move the way he typically does, is he going to be a sitting duck against some of the, it's a good pass rush in Houston, not a great defense, but a good pass rush. I think there's some intrigue here.
You know who the Chiefs backup quarterback is now?
It's Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've already heard multiple comments, even from Andy Reid, about how much confidence they have in Carson Wentz. Good. I don't think Patrick Mahomes even remotely thinks about taking the field for this game.
Really?
I don't think
What do you think about, because all 4, this is what the NFL did. These 4 teams that play on Saturday are also playing on Christmas Day. They're just playing different opponents. The Chiefs go to Pittsburgh, and I believe the Ravens go to Houston, I believe. Because if you travel on Saturday, you host on Wednesday. Do you think that the Patrick Mahomes will play on Christmas Day in Pittsburgh?
Well, it will depend on. Now, I fully expect Buffalo to beat the Patriots. If Kansas City beats Houston, no, he doesn't play on Christmas either.
Okay.
I mean, I think they're looking at it as, I think that Kansas City knows they cannot let Buffalo take the 1 seed. I think that's a death march going there in January to play Josh Allen in whatever weather might be there. You just don't want to. So Kansas City knows they have to keep home field. I think that they don't even have him warm up or walk on the field this week with a uniform on. If you beat Houston, sit him again, and just because then you can lose the next game. You don't care.
Yeah.
You do have a 2-game lead over them right now. So I think that this now they lose and Buffalo wins. I think you start getting nervous and you're like, how's that ankle feel?
Yeah, it's a good point. That's a really solid point. And I think this is going to be a good slate of games on Saturday. Again, 1 o'clock Texans Chiefs, 4:30 Steelers Ravens. But let's not overlook the Thursday game. In terms of seeding in the AFC playoff picture, you've got the Broncos at 9-5 and the Chargers at 8-6. This is going to have a lot of significance to it in terms of if the Broncos win, they're going to solidify their spot above the Chargers. If they lose, it is, like I've said a couple times in the show, it's a race to the finish. What do you think about this game?
I love it. This is a big game. So the Chargers beat the Broncos in Denver week 6 or 7, something like that. I think they beat them. It was 23-16. Two great defenses, or scoring defenses at least. Bo Nix has gotten a lot better since then, for sure. So going into LA, the Chargers are inconsistent and I don't think they can lose this game. You start getting their percentage that we were just talking about goes down. If the Bengals win, that Bengals percentage, they start getting closer together and looking like you right now it's stupid because you're talking about 5% and 70 or 87%. Okay. Those start looking like 65% and 40% in the next couple of weeks. You start getting nervous. It's a big game for both teams because this is your 6 and 7 seed. Right. So loser is set to be the first one out, as possibly, of the playoffs. So
this is in LA. Keep that in mind, not in Denver. And also, Justin Herbert's dealing with an injury himself. And this offense with Gus Edwards at running back compared to J.K. Dobbins is not the same. J.K. Dobbins is at least a little bit dynamic. Actually, he's pretty dynamic when he's healthy, but he's on IR. Gus Edwards is not. Okay, so this is a game that the Chargers, they've been leaking oil the last few weeks. They've got to find a way to right the ship. They've got to find a way to say, okay, Denver, you're a class behind us, and we're going to win this game. We're going to have the head-to-head win over you. And you said that they beat them. The Chargers beat the Broncos earlier in the season, yes?
Yep.
So they would sweep the season series. That's going to be a good one on Thursday night. I'm looking forward to that one.
Gus Edwards averaging 3.4 yards a carry, not having a good year.
No, he's not. And so I'm looking at the other. I don't see a lot of other games that I would consider must-see games on this docket. What about you?
I mean, Minnesota Seattle is pretty interesting.
Sure, that's a good one.
Minnesota is going to be one of those teams that I think's right there. If the Steelers beat the Ravens, or the Steelers and Ravens both, they're that same kind of team as Minnesota, where you're going to end up having a really good record. You got double-digit wins pretty early in the season, and nobody's talking about you because there's two teams ahead of you that are getting a lot of publicity, or you're not getting talked about because of who your starting quarterback is. Minnesota's putting up a lot of points, and they're scoring, and in general, most time their defense is shown to be pretty okay. They at least have good game plans. They're just the wrong amount of scary team that can put up just enough points. And I mean, I think they can put up 40 against anybody if they get everything going together right. And Justin Jefferson can have a 200-yard game in the playoffs. But Seattle's got to get right as well. That it seems like everybody in the NFC West is reeling right now, except for the Rams. The Rams have figured it out, and everybody else is below them now. This is a big game in Seattle that the Seahawks need Geno Smith to be okay. Kenneth Walker is supposed to be coming back. Charbonnet looked good 2 weeks ago, did not look good this past week. They need Kenneth Walker back. If Geno's okay, the Seattle's got to put up a fight here, though, and potentially they really need to beat Minnesota.
So we're going to switch it up and from here on out at this point in the show, and we're still going to talk about, we can only watch one game and all that stuff. But instead of doing fantasy lineups, instead of like sneaky good matchups, what we decided to do is, well, let's also take a look. We talked about the AFC playoff picture. Let's look at the draft order, because there's a lot of teams out there right now that are starting to look at where will we fall in the 2025 NFL draft order currently. This is according to Tankathon. I think they're pretty accurate. The Las Vegas Raiders possess the number 1 overall pick with their 2-12 record. The New York Giants, they're second. The New England Patriots are third. The Jacksonville Jaguars, fourth. Carolina Panthers, 5. Tennessee Titans, 6. Cleveland Browns, 7. All of those teams that I just mentioned have either 2 or 3 wins. That's it. Then you go Jets. They have 4 wins. They're 8th. Chicago 4 wins, their 9th, and New Orleans, your Saints 5-9 come in to round out the top 10. So now let's take it back to the schedule. There are a lot of games that will have serious significance in the draft order. When you look at two teams that are just like Patriots, Bills, you're assuming the Patriots are going to lose. How about Jaguars, Raiders, 2-12 versus 3-11? That's significant in terms of prioritizing the NFL draft next year. Because if you're mathematically eliminated, you're playing for pride. But a lot of organizations are thinking, we need to get a top 10 pick. Hell, you were saying that to me about the Saints before we hit record. What do you think about some of these? We'd call them duds, but they do have meaning to teams that are out of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, this bottom 10 of the NFL's mostly been pretty awful. I think there's a few teams here that have a good base, that it, if they get a good draft pick, it really helps them out. In Jacksonville, if you believe in Trevor Lawrence and him coming back healthy, they've got a good base of a team around there. I don't think he's played great, but
Right.
it was just last offseason he signed his 5-year, $275 million deal. But then you got teams like Chicago and potentially even New Orleans that have some good roster pieces and are still going through a lot of changes. They're both going to hire new head coaches, but they get a higher draft pick. It helps what's already a decent roster. So I think there's different. And even New England, if Drake May is an NFL quarterback, which it's starting to look like, there's something there to develop. It's a team that they end up with a top 3 pick. That's a pretty big deal for them.
Yeah, because you look at this list of just the top 10 teams that could potentially be getting new coaches. Who knows if Doug Peterson's going to last in Jacksonville? There's people that want Gerard Mayo out in New England. Carolina's going to need a new coach. Oh, no, actually, they kept their coach, didn't they? They didn't fire their coach.
Right.
You never know with the Panthers. And Tennessee's sticking with their guy. I don't think Kevin Stefanski's going anywhere. The Jets are going to need a new coach. Chicago's going to need a new coach. New Orleans is going to need a new coach. Antonio Pierce with the Raiders. Are they going to get rid of him? Brian Daboll with the Giants. There could be some turnover there, and that's going to – I mean, as a Saints fan, let me ask you this question. You need to hire a new head coach. That's going to impact a lot of what you do in the offseason in terms of how aggressive they want to be. What are they going to do with that draft pick? If you have a top 10 pick, do you potentially trade it? Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens when you have to see a front office kind of have some turnover.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the conversation you're having with coaches. So, I mean, you want their vision for what they're going to bring in and how they see the team can be improved. And just using New Orleans for an example, you're going to have, I'm sure, somebody interview there that comes in as like, hey, next year is the last year of Derek Carr's deal. I want an extension on him. I want to have 3 full years with Derek Carr. I need that veteran presence. I can build around him. Here's where I want to spend resources on veteran signings. And then here's where I want to spend draft capital. The same time, you can have another coach come in and say, that's not my quarterback. We're going to need a couple years to figure things out. This also isn't the draft where we're getting our quarterback. So somebody that's on the roster like Spencer Rattler, that's going to be our quarterback next year. Or Carson Wentz is, somebody's going to be the next Sam Darnold, the next Geno Smith, the next Baker Mayfield. So do you take a shot at one of those guys because you figure they're like, Derek Carr's not that guy for us, but I want this guy, and I want to develop Spencer Rattler, or we're going to trade up and get Shedeur Sanders. Everybody's going to have their own thing that they're selling the team on for how they're going to develop. And I'm sure there's going to be somebody interviewing that wants to tie his ticket to Derek Carr. And there's going to be somebody they're auto eject for them. And it ends the Derek Carr era.
Fair enough.
So each team's going to have that. I mean, you've got teams like the Giants. They already made that decision. Daniel Jones will not be the quarterback of the Giants next year.
Yeah.
And obviously Cleveland's going to have to get sold on something. I mean, they got a couple people under contract to be quarterback. So it's interesting.
Yeah, we're going to touch on that, and we'll update you on the updated draft order week by week as we get closer to the end of the season. But you can only watch one game. This is a slate. We talked about a lot of these games. Wesley, if you could only watch one, though, which one are you watching?
And I'll watch that Pittsburgh and Baltimore game. I'll take it from you, so you don't have to be the one to say it. But it is interesting. I think that I think it becomes a meh result for me if Baltimore wins and then they're both just looking like they're falling apart at the same time.
Yeah.
If this, I want to see fight from both of these teams. I want to see something from both of them. There's potentially over the last few weeks, both of them looking a little older. Derrick Henry's not hitting the yards that he was hitting. Russ isn't completing some of the passes that he was. He's not avoiding the sacks and the pressure that he was. You need to see some improvement from both of those teams, but that's a big game, man, and it's in Baltimore, division rival game. Potentially, this could be the game that reflects back on who, if either one of them winning the division could come back down to this game. So that's a big one. What about for you? If since I took your real favorite game, which one was?
Yeah, I mean, because if you're looking for intrigue, Steelers Ravens has it all. The Steelers will win the division if they win the game, because there's no way the Ravens could catch them. So, and even if they tied them, the Steelers would have the sweep of the season series and it would be done. But I'm looking at this slate of games and I'm actually thinking Texans Chiefs, because I think there's obviously the Chiefs play the Pittsburgh Steelers on Christmas Day. So I'm intrigued by that. I'm also intrigued by, if Carson Wentz does start, what does that look like? And how does CJ
What if
Stroud?
it looks good?
It could. I mean, Andy Reid's a great coach. And we've seen, like, look at Baker Mayfield. He went to LA and he spent some time with Sean McVay, and he comes out and he looks like a completely different guy. And he played okay for the Rams, and then he turns his career around with Tampa Bay. I'm not saying that's going to happen for Carson Wentz, but it could. I would say if there's one other game, I'm intrigued by Broncos Chargers on Thursday night as well. So I would say it's a toss-up between those two games.
What if the Chiefs haven't scored more than 30 points this season? What if they score 40 against the Texans with Carson Wentz? You benching Patrick Mahomes for the rest of the season? Is Carson Wentz
yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. No, it'll be, like I said, there's intrigue there. That's what I love about these matchups, and that's when I have to pick. You can only watch one. I'm going to take the one with the storylines, with the intrigue that has significance to it, and that's exactly where I'm going to go. So, all right, this has been a good show, Wesley. Well, I don't know what we're going to do next week. We'll have to figure out what time we're going to do this show and all that stuff. And we have Christmas Day games, but still, what's coming up with the Dome Patrol podcast? How can we find you there and on social media?
I do just want to say a moment of silence for the San Francisco-Miami game that earlier this year, the start of the year, would have seemed like a fun game to watch with two highly explosive offenses with all kinds of, players. And it's nobody even cares. We went through the whole show without even
2 6-8 teams.
But you can find me at Dome Patrol PCast or at Wesley 13 on X. How about you, Jeff? How can we find your Pittsburgh Steelers coverage on Saturday?
Yeah, Steel Curtain Network. Anywhere where you get your podcast, search Steelers or Steel Curtain Network. You'll find us. Also, steelcurtainnetwork.com. If you want to find me on Twitter, at jhartman, HARTMAN_PIT. That's a wrap. Enjoy week 16, man, and we'll talk next week. Wesley, take it easy.
See you next week.